this national income accounting equation, we can now come up with a graphical illustration. And this graphical illustration, we are interested to show the aggregate demands on one side and the total output or the total income on the other, which is the y, our y. Okay, and it is also important, before we plot the function of total income that we have derived, to discuss an issue of equilibrium, or a desirable condition that would make us to say that the aggregate demand is equal to the total income in the economy. So we shall have this aggregate demand curve equal to our y, the total income in the economy, to imply the equilibrium condition, or the condition when the amount of goods, the total amount of goods and services that people want in the economy through investments, through consumption, and through government expenditure are indeed equal to the total income or the total output that the economy has produced. So that this line is pitched at 45 degrees to mean that it cuts in between the AD output, or the AD volumes or value, and the total income value. So this line is just passing through the middle of the two values, the aggregate demand and the total income, so that any point along this line is a potential point when we plot our total income function using a graph. We shall assume that our total income increases with an increase in aggregate demand, so that it might take this shape, and that could be an equilibrium point, because at that point it means that our total income will equal to the total aggregate, or the aggregate demand in short. So this line could be A bar, the autonomous investments. I'll call it 1 plus the CYD, the function that we have derived, minus BI. Okay, and this level of the level of aggregate demand here, where the total income function cuts the variable axis, could be equivalent, or is equivalent to A bar, the autonomous expenditure, because that is a constant. This should be A bar 1. And now suppose there is an increase maybe in the level of income, or there is a change in investments due to changes in interest rates, or there is change in consumption, for example due to changes in income of individuals, then this should somehow affect the total income in this economy. Yeah, so we could have I'll single out a change in investments due to changes in interest rates, for example, which we are going to demonstrate in the shortly. But it's important to see that a shift in the total income function would result into an increase in the level of income, and this we are saying could be due to an increase in autonomous government spending, for example. So that if there is an increase in government spending, which is autonomous in this case, maybe there is an increase in the budget of a nation through maybe increased salaries of teachers, salaries of our men in uniform, salaries of civil servants, or indeed due to an increase in budget due to developmental budget, like money allocated to the construction of roads, bridges, stadiums, hospitals, that would have the effect of increasing the total output. And so we are showing that here by this upward shift of the total income curve, moving us from the initial equilibrium point of A to B, where that will also come with an increase in aggregate demand. People demanding more of investments, more of consumption, and maybe through government expenditure. So the effect of that shift, or the effect of the increase, we are saying that we have an increased level of income, say from Y1 to Y2, where the A here should be 2 because we are moving from A1 to A2 bar, so that at the point where our new total income function is cutting the AD line should be equivalent to the value of A2 bar, the autonomous expenditure. This graph will help us to relate well the effect of income, the effect of interest rate and spending in the next explanation that we are going to look into. So now let us look at the relationship between income, spending and interest rates. Now that we understand this, which we should bear in mind as we look at the relationship between income, interest rate and spending. To look at this relationship better, we are going to use or assume that we have two markets. So assume we have two markets in the economy. On one hand we have the asset markets, and on the other hand we have the goods markets, the real sector. Okay, so two markets, the goods markets and the asset market. And in between these two markets, we assume that we have the level of income. So in the asset markets, we could have two markets as examples of asset market. Note that we could have the money markets, so we have money markets, and we could also have the bond market, which are examples of asset markets. And within the money markets, on one side we have demand, and on the other we have the supply of money. Again, for the bond markets, we could also have the demand for bonds on one side and the supply of it on the other, which are forces that will determine the equilibrium of these two markets respectively. Now, we assume that we have the level of income that might affect either the asset market or the goods market. To begin with, assume that individuals' incomes have increased in the economy. So assume there is an increase in the level of income that affects the asset market. So such an increase in the level of income is going to increase the money demand. Yeah? The more you have as money, the more you would want to hold as money, and the more you would want to buy because you have more money. So such an increase in income is going to increase people's appetite for money, to hold even more. So we expect that the demand for money is going to increase in the asset market. People will be looking forward to hold more money for various reasons. And so, what is the implication of having an increase in demand for money? The impact of having an increase in demand for money, because people have higher incomes than before, which is forcing them to probably also spend more, is that the cost of borrowing is going to increase as well. So the cost of borrowing is the interest rates. The cost of borrowing the money is the interest rates. So I will denote the interest rates here, that we have the interest rate. So the increase in demand for money will result into an increase in the interest rate. Why are we saying that? As we have already said, that people usually finance the possession of money through borrowing. So the cost of borrowing is the interest rate. Since the financial intermediaries will be signaled that there are a lot of people looking forward to have money, it will be very easy for them to increase the interest rate, so that even the little that, the few people that will borrow will still give them a higher return by the interest rate, or the money that they will pay back after they have borrowed. So the interest rate is likely going to increase actually, and an increase in interest rate is going to affect the goods market here. The goods market, of course, in the goods market we also have demand, which is the aggregate demand of goods, and we also have, on the other hand, the output, the two forces that will be taking place. So the output, or the supply of the goods and the services themselves, and on the other hand, the total demand, the aggregate demand on those goods and services. So the effect of an increase in interest rates will not spare the goods market. In the goods market, we have various, goods that we can think of. Goods like, for the case of Malawi, goods like, tomato, tobacco, the maize, but also other manufactured goods that are produced, within the country. During this time of COVID, we're talking of the production of masks. So what is how are interest rates affecting the production of masks, the production of clothes, the production of different goods that we can think of in Malawi, including even the agriculture sector or the manufacturing industry. So the effect of an increase in interest rates is going to probably reduce the output of goods, because people fail to profitably borrow and invest now that the interest rate is higher, so that only few will be able to grow, to produce more through borrowing. And because only a few are able to produce, ceteris paribus, we expect that the output is going to be lower than expected or than before. Such a reduction in outputs will affect the level of income in the economy, the total income. Since the output is low maybe than the demand, we expect the spending or the income to be low. You know that people can also have income through selling of the goods and services that they have produced in the economy. And since they haven't produced much, then we expect that the incomes will also be lower than expected, thereby reducing the level of income. And we are back to looking at how income will affect the asset market or the goods market. So the income, the lower incomes that individuals have will further affect the goods markets, where people will be producing lower because they have lower incomes that they can use as capital to produce the goods and services. Again, the lower incomes will affect the asset market. How? Probably not many people. Many people will be looking forward to borrow, and since the interest rates were higher, banks will notice that not many people are coming to borrow from them. So the only way that banks would still make profits through the money that people borrow and the money that people have saved in the bank is when they reduce the interest rates to attract people to borrow from them. So Yes, the lower incomes will affect the money markets or the asset markets. Here we are only concentrating on the money markets for simplicity. And using Warren's law, we do not have to worry about the bond market, because if the two markets, the money market and the goods market, are in equilibrium, then the bond market should also be in equilibrium. So indeed, the high interest rate before had forced the savers, or the people who save their money, or who link their money to financial intermediaries, since it was attractive for them to save and get a higher return through the increased interest rates. So the banks have money that they can lend, but not many people are available to borrow the money. And because they are signaled that not many people can borrow, then it is an incentive for them to reduce the interest rate, which is the only way they can try to make profits out of the savings through borrowings. So the lower incomes will reduce people's demands for money through high interest rates. But again, because the banks or the financial intermediaries are not lending as they would have, they will be forced, or they somehow see that they can make profits, they can make business through reduced interest rates. So the reduction in interest rates will increase borrowings, for people to make investments. So the people can increase their income. People can increase their income through borrowing from the financial intermediaries. Now that the interest rates are low, and such an increase in borrowings will boost the output in the economy, affecting the goods market through a boom in output, in goods, in productivity of that economy. And such a boom in output will increase or corresponds to an increase in the levels of income. So we are back that the income has increased, and you know how such an increase would affect both the goods and the asset market in the economy. So any intervention by the government, suppose the government decides to affect the asset market or the goods market through an intervention, it's possible. Any intervention by the government that affects money supply or money demands, or indeed bond supply or bond demand, is called, or will be called, a monetary intervention or a monetary policy. Similarly, any intervention by the government, any action or inaction that is going to affect aggregate demand or the level of output in the economy, in the goods markets, is enough, or is called a fiscal policy. So in our next explanation, we are going to see how a monetary policy and a fiscal policy would interact and affect the asset markets and the goods markets.